The girl heard the guards speaking German and warned the Hells Angels not to enter the meeting. The remote estate, shrouded in the perpetual mist that clung to the ancient pines, was more fortress than home. Its jagged silhouette against the perpetually gray sky of the Austrian Alps spoke of old money, of secrets, and of a certain impenetrable resolve. Lena, barely 20, her hands chapped from endless scrubbing, knew little of such things. Her world was the scullery, the vast, echoing corridors she cleaned, and the hushed whispers of the other domestic staff. She had secured the temporary position through a distant cousin, a stroke of luck she had been told, given the estate's reclusive owner and its infrequent need for extra hands. This particular week, however, was different. The air crackled with an unfamiliar tension, a palpable weight that pressed down on every soul within its stone walls. The owner, an elusive figure known only as Herr Gruber, was hosting a private meeting, an event that had necessitated an unprecedented surge in security and an almost military precision in the estate's operations. From the moment the first armored vehicles rumbled up the winding gravel driveway, Lena had known this was no ordinary gathering of business associates. The men who disembarked were not the usual stoic bodyguards one might expect from a wealthy recluse. These were hard-faced, unsmiling individuals, their movements economical, their eyes constantly scanning, assessing every shadow, every rustle of leaves. Their dark, well-tailored suits did little to soften their menacing aura. They moved with a synchronized efficiency that spoke of extensive training, a discipline far beyond that of typical private security. Lena, tasked with polishing the antique silverware in the cavernous dining hall, found herself instinctively lowering her gaze whenever one of them passed, an inexplicable chill tracing its way down her spine. The very air seemed to thicken with their presence, heavy with unspoken threats and a quiet, simmering danger. Her job kept her moving, a silent phantom gliding through the background. She emptied wastebaskets in the opulent guest rooms, wiped down the polished surfaces of the grand library, and, most frequently, found herself in the sprawling, state-of-the-art kitchen, assisting the head chef, a stern but fair woman named Ingrid. It was in these liminal spaces, the unseen arteries of the estate, that Lena began to notice the small, disquieting details. The normal staff, usually a garrulous bunch, were now subdued, speaking in hushed tones, if they spoke at all. Their eyes held a nervous flicker, a shared understanding of something profoundly unsettling unfolding around them. Plates of untouched food were returned from the various temporary guard posts, indicating a vigilance that superseded even hunger. The security men seemed to operate on a different rhythm, a constant low hum of readiness that permeated every corner of the vast property. One afternoon, while meticulously cleaning the intricate carvings of a heavy oak door leading to what was normally a seldom-used study, Lena heard voices. They were low, guttural, and distinct. Two of the security men stood just inside the room, their backs to her, their conversation a rapid-fire exchange of clipped, hard consonants. Lena froze, her polishing cloth still in her hand. She didn't understand most of what they were saying, but certain words pierced through the linguistic barrier, words she recognized from the smattering of German she'd picked up during her brief, ill-fated stint as a cleaner in a Munich hostel years ago. Sicherung, she heard, meaning security. Positionen, positions. And then, more chillingly, bereit, ready, and Ziel, target. The tone was not one of casual conversation, but of instruction, of command, of a grim preparation. Her heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She quickly retreated, feigning a sudden need for more cleaning solution. Back in the safety of the linen closet, her mind raced. Why German? This was Austria, yes, but the estate usually employed local staff, and the owner himself was known to converse in English or French. These men were clearly not locals, their accents thick, their demeanor foreign and menacing. It wasn't just the language, it was the context. The hushed urgency, the specific vocabulary, it all painted a picture that was far from a routine security detail. This was something else entirely, something darker, more premeditated. The word Ziel echoed in her mind. Target. Who was the target? And why were these men, these German-speaking, heavily armed individuals, preparing for it with such grim determination? Over the next few hours, Lena became a shadow, her senses heightened, her ears straining for any scrap of information. She deliberately chose routes through the service corridors that passed near the main reception areas, the temporary command center, and the various guard posts. The German continued. She caught fragments. Die Ankunft ist für Sonnenuntergang geplant, the arrival is planned for sunset. Kein Feller, no mistakes. And then, a phrase that sent a jolt of pure ice through her veins, Die Fall ist gestalt. The trap is set. The words, spoken with a chillingly calm certainty by one of the guards into a secure radio, were unmistakable. Lena didn't need a full translation to grasp the horrific implication. This wasn't a meeting. This was an ambush. Her mind furiously pieced together the fragments. The unprecedented security, the grim faces, the German commands, the talk of targets and traps. Who were the unsuspecting victims? Who was walking into this meticulously planned snare? She remembered overhearing Ingrid, the head chef, complaining to another kitchen staffer about the clientele for the meeting. Hell's Angels, Ingrid had muttered, rolling her eyes, as if we don't have enough trouble with these grim security types. Now we have to cater to a motorcycle gang. At the time, Lena had dismissed it as idle gossip, another quirky detail of the estate's eccentric owner. Now, the words slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. The Hell's Angels. They were the target. They were walking into a trap, a meticulously laid ambush by these professional, German-speaking operatives. A cold dread settled deep in her stomach, quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. She imagined the scene, the unsuspecting bikers riding into the estate, perhaps expecting a negotiation, a parley, only to be met with concentrated fire. The sheer brutality of it, the cold-blooded premeditation, sickened her. She was just a cleaner, a nobody, caught in the crossfire of something far beyond her comprehension. But she also knew. She had information that could save lives, a terrible secret she had stumbled upon by accident. Could she simply stand by and let it happen? The thought was unbearable. Her hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from a growing sense of urgency. She had to warn them. But how? The estate was a fortress, crawling with these dangerous men. Every exit was monitored, every communication channel likely intercepted. The sun was already beginning its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange and deep crimson. Sunset. The arrival. Time was running out. She had to move, and she had to move now. Her heart pounded a desperate rhythm, a silent countdown to an impending catastrophe. The decision was made. She would find a way. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the urgency of the fading light outside. The decision was made, but the how remained a terrifying abyss. The estate, designed to keep intruders out, was now her prison, its very structure an obstacle to her desperate mission. Every window offered only a view of the sprawling, manicured grounds, patrolled by unseen eyes. Every door was a potential barrier, every corridor a gauntlet. Her temporary position, once a stroke of luck, now felt like a cruel joke, placing her directly in the path of a looming massacre. She was a ghost in the machine, a silent observer, but now she had to scream. Her first thought was communication. A phone. But she knew the rules. All personal devices had been confiscated upon arrival, stored in a locked cabinet in the staff quarters. The estate's internal communication system was strictly for staff-to-staff or staff-to-security, monitored and recorded. There was no direct line to the outside world, no way to dial emergency services without immediate interception. Even if there were, what would she say? Hello, I'm a cleaner, and a bunch of German-speaking thugs are about to ambush the Hell's Angels at her Gruber's estate? She'd be dismissed as mad, or worse, apprehended before she could finish the sentence. Her gaze fell on her cleaning cart, a mundane collection of brushes, cloths, and bottles. Useless. Or was it? She ran through the possibilities. Could she leave a note? Where? How would it reach the Hell's Angels before they entered the trap? Would it even be seen? The security was too tight. Any foreign object, any unexpected movement, would be noticed. These men weren't just guards, they were trained operatives, their senses finely tuned to detect anomalies. She remembered the main gate. A massive, wrought-iron structure, reinforced and always manned. Beyond it, the long, winding gravel driveway, flanked by ancient pines, offered no cover, no escape. The Hells Angels would be visible for hundreds of meters before they even reached the gate. That was the first line of defense, or rather, the first point of no return for the bikers. She needed to get past the gate, or find a way to signal them before they reached it. The kitchen, she thought. Ingrid, the head chef, was a stern woman, but fair. Perhaps she could confide in her. No. Ingrid was loyal to Gruber, and likely terrified herself. Any attempt to involve another staff member would only put them in danger and potentially expose Lena. This was her burden, her secret, and her impossible task. She began to move, her movements deliberately slow, measured, maintaining the illusion of a diligent cleaner. She pushed her cart through the service corridors, her ears straining, her eyes darting. She needed an opportunity, a weakness in the impenetrable web of security. The sun dipped lower, casting long, distorted shadows through the ornate windows. The light was fading fast, and with it, her chances. She passed the temporary command center again, a converted drawing room now bristling with screens and communication equipment. A guard stood at the door, impassive. Inside, she caught a glimpse of maps, tactical diagrams, and the glow of monitors. The trap was indeed elaborate. These were not mere thugs, they were professionals, executing a meticulously planned operation. A desperate idea sparked in her mind. The estate had several older, disused outbuildings, a crumbling stable, a neglected greenhouse, a tool shed. They were outside the main perimeter of the immediate security, but still within the estate grounds. Perhaps one of them offered a vantage point, a way to be seen. But getting there would mean venturing off her assigned cleaning routes, a move that would instantly draw attention. Her mind raced back to the German phrases. Die Ankunft ist für Sonnenuntergang geplant. Sunset. It was almost upon them. Kein Fehler. No mistakes. And most chillingly, Die Fall ist gestalt. The trap is set. The words hammered at her, demanding action. She decided to head for the laundry room, a vast space in the basement. It was usually deserted at this time, most of the day's washing already done. It offered a moment of solitude, a chance to think without the constant threat of watchful eyes. The clatter of the industrial machines offered a comforting, if temporary, shield for her racing thoughts. As she descended the stone steps, the muffled sounds of the estate faded, replaced by the rhythmic thrum of the dryers. In the dim light, surrounded by towering stacks of crisp white linen, Lena forced herself to breathe. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed a plan that was audacious, yet within the bounds of her capabilities as a nobody cleaner. What if she could create a distraction? A fire alarm? No, that would only alert the security to her presence, not the Hells Angels. It would bring them down on her, and the bikers would still ride into the ambush. She needed a direct warning, something that would stop them dead in their tracks before they entered the estate proper. She thought of the service entrance, a less imposing gate used by delivery trucks and staff. It was still guarded, but perhaps less intensely than the main gate. It led to a different section of the winding driveway, a more secluded stretch. If she could reach that, perhaps. A sudden thought, cold and clear, cut through her desperation. The guards were using radios. Secure radios. But what if she could disrupt them? What if she could create interference, a brief moment of chaos that might make the Hells Angels pause, or alert them that something was wrong? But how? She knew nothing of electronics, let alone jamming signals. Her eyes scanned the laundry room, searching for anything, any mundane object that could be repurposed. Her gaze landed on a stack of old, worn-out bed sheets, destined for the rag pile. White. What if she could get outside, to a high point, and wave something? But again, the guards would see her first. She then remembered the estate's generator shed, located a short distance from the main building, nestled behind a dense thicket of spruce trees. It was a utilitarian structure, rarely visited by anyone other than the groundskeeper, and occasionally, the security detail to check on its status. It housed the estate's backup power, and more importantly, a large, powerful siren for emergencies. A general alarm meant for fires or major breaches. Could she reach it? The path to the generator's shed was overgrown, not part of her usual cleaning rounds. It would mean venturing into the perimeter's less monitored zones. And if she triggered the siren, it would certainly alert everyone, including the Hells Angels. But it would also alert the German-speaking operatives to her, possibly before she could even get the message across. The risk was immense. If she was caught, she knew what these men were capable of. She had seen their eyes, cold and devoid of mercy. But the alternative, allowing an innocent group to be slaughtered, was an even heavier burden. She made her way out of the laundry room, her steps lighter, a glimmer of a plan forming. The generator shed was her target. She'd have to be quick, stealthy, and pray for a window of opportunity. She knew the general layout of the grounds from her sporadic cleaning duties, often having to navigate the estate's sprawling exterior to reach various outbuildings or staff quarters. She chose a route that took her through the kitchen garden, a labyrinth of trellises and raised beds, currently dormant in the late autumn chill. It offered some cover, a chance to move unseen by the main security posts. Ingrid, the head chef, was still bustling, preparing for the evening's meeting, a grim irony that Lena couldn't shake. As she slipped through a gap in the garden hedge, Lena heard the distant rumble. It was faint at first, a low thrum that vibrated through the ground more than it registered in the air. Then it grew, slowly but steadily, the distinctive growl of multiple large engines. Motorcycles. They were coming. The Hells Angels were approaching. A fresh wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over her. She was too late. No, not yet. They were still distant. The sound was still far off, probably still on the main road leading to the estate's long driveway. She had a few minutes, perhaps 5, maybe 10 at most, before they reached the main gate. The generator shed. It was her only chance. She moved faster now, pushing through thorny bushes, ignoring the scratches on her hands and face. The generator shed was visible through the trees, a squat concrete building, almost swallowed by the encroaching forest. She could see a faint wisp of smoke from its ventilation shaft, indicating it was operational. As she neared the shed, she saw a figure. One of the uniformed security guards, not one of the German-speaking operatives, but a local, older man, was emerging from the shed, wiping his hands on a rag. He must have just completed a routine check. Lena froze, pressing herself against the rough bark of a pine tree, her heart pounding. The guard locked the shed door with a heavy padlock, then turned and began walking slowly back towards the main building, whistling a tuneless melody. Lena waited, motionless, until his retreating figure was out of sight. The sound of the approaching motorcycles was growing louder, more distinct, a symphony of powerful engines. Time was a rapidly draining hourglass. She crept forward, her eyes fixed on the padlock. It was a sturdy, old-fashioned lock, but not one of the high-tech, impenetrable devices she'd seen elsewhere on the estate. She rummaged through her cleaning cart, which she had discreetly pushed ahead of her, hoping to find something, anything, that could help. A long, thin metal scraper, used for dried-on grime. A small, sturdy screwdriver. Not ideal, but perhaps enough. Her fingers trembled as she tried to manipulate the scraper into the lock mechanism. It was awkward, the metal too thick, the angle wrong. Frustration burned through her. The motorcycle engines roared louder, a visceral sound that now echoed through the forest. They were closer, much closer. She pressed her ear against the shed door, listening. The generator hummed steadily inside. She needed to get in, find the siren's activation switch. She knew it would be a simple, industrial-grade lever, probably clearly marked. As she fumbled with the lock, a sudden, sharp crack echoed from the direction of the main building. A rifle shot. No, too muffled. Perhaps a branch breaking. But the sound was enough to send a fresh jolt of terror through her. The guards were on edge, jumpy. Any loud noise, any disturbance, would draw their attention instantly. She pulled back, her mind racing. The lock was too difficult. She didn't have the time or the tools. Was there another way? She scanned the shed's exterior. No windows, just solid concrete. A small, rusty metal grate for ventilation, too small to squeeze through. The roar of the motorcycles was now a continuous, thundering presence. They were almost at the gate. She could visualize them, a phalanx of chrome and leather, unaware of the death trap awaiting them. Despair threatened to overwhelm her. She had failed. They were going to die, and she had done nothing. But then, a flicker of stubborn defiance, a refusal to accept defeat, ignited within her. She wouldn't just stand by. She looked around frantically. The ground was littered with small rocks, loose gravel. Not enough to throw and make a significant sound that would carry over the motorcycle engines or be interpreted as a warning. Her eyes fell on a pile of old, discarded lumber near the back of the shed, remnants from a long-forgotten repair job. Among them was a heavy, splintered plank, perhaps 2 meters long. It was cumbersome, but it was sturdy. A desperate, reckless idea formed. Not the siren. Something else. Something loud, something that would cause a commotion. She grabbed the plank, grunting with effort, and dragged it towards the side of the shed facing the main driveway. It was heavy, scraping against the ground, making a noise she prayed wouldn't carry too far. The roar of the bikes was deafening now, a wall of sound that vibrated through her bones. They were at the gate. She could almost feel the ground tremble beneath her feet. She hoisted the plank, positioning it carefully. The side of the shed had a large, exposed water pipe running along its exterior, feeding the estate's main irrigation system. It was thick, made of heavy-gauge steel, anchored to the concrete wall with sturdy brackets. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, Lena swung the plank, aiming for the pipe. The first blow landed with a dull clang, a sound swallowed by the thunder of the motorcycles. She swung again, harder, putting all her desperation into the strike. Clang! This time, the sound was sharper, more resonant, a metallic shriek that cut through the engine noise. She swung a third time, a wild, desperate effort. Crack! The pipe buckled, a spray of water erupting from a fractured joint. The sound was unmistakable, the sudden rush of water mingling with the metallic shriek. It was loud, chaotic, and completely unexpected. The effect was immediate. From her vantage point, Lena could see the main gate. The Hells Angels, a dark, formidable convoy, had just entered the driveway, their headlights cutting through the deepening twilight. But as the pipe burst, a sudden, almost imperceptible hesitation rippled through their ranks. The lead bikes slowed, their riders turning their heads, trying to discern the source of the unexpected noise, the sudden geyser of water. A guard at the main gate, initially focused on the approaching bikers, spun around, his attention drawn to the commotion at the generator shed. He shouted something into his radio, his voice strained. Other guards, positioned in various strategic points along the driveway, also seemed to be reacting, their movements betraying a momentary confusion. Lena didn't pause. She had created a distraction, a disruption. Now she had to amplify it, make it impossible to ignore. She swung the plank again, aiming for another section of the pipe, hoping to cause further damage, further chaos. The water was gushing out now, pooling rapidly on the ground, reflecting the last vestiges of the sunset. The German-speaking operatives, hidden in their positions, would certainly be reacting. This wasn't part of their plan. This was an unforeseen variable, a wrench thrown into their meticulously orchestrated ambush. Would it be enough? Would the Hells Angels understand the subtle cue, the unexpected chaos, as a warning? Or would they dismiss it as a mere accident, an estate maintenance issue, and continue their slow, deliberate ride into the trap? Lena knew she had bought them seconds, perhaps a minute. But those seconds were precious. And she was now exposed. The guard at the main gate had already turned his attention fully towards the generator shed. He was shouting again, and this time, she could hear the urgency, the alarm in his voice. He was pointing at her. She dropped the plank, her muscles screaming in protest. Her gaze flickered to the Hells Angels, still paused, still assessing. They hadn't fled, not yet. But they hadn't continued their journey either. They were looking, listening, their powerful machines idling, a low rumble of uncertain power. A sharp, guttural shout pierced the air, closer this time. Halt! Was Max Duda? It was one of the German-speaking operatives, his voice laced with menace. He was running towards her, his weapon already half-raised. Lena knew she had been spotted. The game was up. But the message, however crude, however indirect, had been delivered. Now, it was up to the Hells Angels to interpret it, to save themselves. And it was up to Lena to survive the immediate aftermath of her desperate act. The sunset had finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the estate into a twilight that promised only darkness and violence. The German operative, a hulking figure whose dark suit seemed to absorb the last rays of light, was closing in, his face a mask of cold fury. Lena scrambled back from the gushing pipe, her hands slick with mud and water, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The roar of the Hells Angels' motorcycles, now a thunderous presence just beyond the main gate, mingled with the sudden gush of water and the operative's guttural shouts. She knew this was it. She had done what she could. Halt! Stehen bleiben, the operative bellowed, his voice cutting through the din. His weapon, a compact pistol, was now fully raised, pointing directly at her. Lena froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her gaze flickered one last time towards the main gate. The Hells Angels, a formidable line of powerful machines and leather-clad riders, remained paused, their engines idling, a collective low growl. Their heads were still turned, not just towards the burst pipe and the shouting operative, but now, crucially, towards her. They saw her, a small, trembling figure, covered in mud and water, being accosted by a heavily armed man. The operative reached her in a few powerful strides, grabbing her roughly by the arm. His grip was like iron, his fingers digging into her flesh. He spun her around, pushing her hard against the concrete wall of the shed. The cold, rough surface scraped against her back. Was zum Teufel tust du hier? He snarled, pressing the barrel of his pistol against her temple. Lena could smell the metallic scent of the weapon, the sharp tang of his sweat. Her mind raced, not with fear, but with a desperate hope that her message had landed. At the main gate, the Hells Angels' confusion was rapidly morphing into suspicion. The sudden, inexplicable chaos at the generator shed, the sight of a terrified young woman being manhandled by an armed guard, did not fit the narrative of a routine business meeting. Their sharp eyes, accustomed to reading danger, picked up on the operative's aggression, the undisguised menace in his posture. This was not a security detail. This was an attack. From their hidden positions, the other German operatives, now alerted by the commotion, began to move. Their carefully orchestrated ambush was unraveling. The sudden burst pipe, the shouting, the exposed cleaner, it was all wrong. Their secure radios crackled with urgent, clipped commands. Was this los? Melden Sie die Situation. Die Zielhalten der Pforte. Sicherung, was ist Ihre position? Panic, a dangerous luxury, was creeping into their ranks. One of the lead Hells Angels, a grizzled man with a weathered face and a gaze as sharp as a hawk's, raised a gloved hand. The entire column of motorcycles fell silent, their engines cutting out, leaving an eerie quiet punctuated only by the gushing water and the operative's furious whispers to Lena. The sudden silence was more impactful than any noise. It was a statement. Asterisk, we are listening. We are watching. We are not entering blindly, asterisk. The operative holding Lena, momentarily distracted by the sudden quiet from the bikers, pressed the gun harder against her. "Wer hat dich geschickt?" he hissed. Lena shook her head, unable to form words. She was just a cleaner. She had just wanted to save lives. Then, from the darkness beyond the main gate, a single, powerful beam of light cut through the twilight. It was a high-powered spotlight, mounted on one of the lead Hells Angels bikes, now sweeping across the estate grounds, methodically illuminating the concealed positions of the German operatives. The bikers had not just paused, they were assessing, revealing the hidden threat. A ripple of alarm went through the covert security team. Their cover was blown. The element of surprise, their greatest advantage, was gone. The grizzled Hells Angel, still mounted on his bike, now spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the silent grounds, amplified by the sudden quiet. "Looks like we got the wrong address, boys. This ain't no meeting." The operative holding Lena swore under his breath in German. He knew the game was lost. The Hells Angels, wary and now aware, would not ride into the trap. The plan, meticulously crafted by Herr Gruber, had been compromised. Suddenly, a new voice boomed from the main house, cold and sharp, amplified by a loudspeaker. It was Herr Gruber. "What is the meaning of this insubordination? Secure the asset. Eliminate the distraction." His voice, usually so controlled, was laced with barely contained fury. He had seen everything unfold from a monitor in the command center. The operative shifted, his grip tightening on Lena. He had his orders. Eliminate the distraction. Lena saw a flicker in his eyes, a grim resolve. He was going to kill her. But before he could act, another sound ripped through the air, the thunderous roar of a dozen motorcycle engines igniting simultaneously. The Hells Angels were not attacking, they were making a strategic retreat. Their powerful bikes spun in unison, turning away from the main gate, back down the winding gravel driveway. They weren't riding into the trap, but they weren't going to let themselves be easy targets either. They were leaving, but not without a clear message of defiance. The German operatives, now exposed and without the element of surprise, were faced with a dilemma. Engage a retreating, powerful motorcycle gang on their terms, or regroup. Their primary directive was the ambush, not a running battle. Ruckzug. Ruckzug zu den Hauptpositionen, a voice barked over the secure radio, overriding Gruber's earlier command. It was the lead operative, a cooler head prevailing. The ambush was blown. There was no point in a chaotic pursuit. The operative holding Lena shoved her violently to the ground. "Bleib here," he snarled, before turning and sprinting towards the main building, his pistol still in hand, his mission now to regroup and secure the estate. Lena lay gasping on the cold, wet ground, her body aching, but her mind flooded with a wave of immense relief. They were gone. They were safe. She pushed herself up, her legs trembling. The gushing water pipe continued its frantic spray, a chaotic monument to her desperate act. The distant rumble of the retreating motorcycles slowly faded into the night. The estate, moments ago a scene of imminent bloodshed, was now eerily quiet, save for the water and the distant, agitated shouts of the remaining security. Lena knew she couldn't stay. Gruber's fury would be absolute. She was a witness, a saboteur. She was no longer just a cleaner, she was a liability. She had to disappear. Her temporary position was over, and her life was in immediate danger. She moved quickly, instinctively seeking the shadows. She knew the estate's labyrinthine service corridors and hidden paths better than anyone. Her cleaning cart was long forgotten. She needed to get to the staff quarters, retrieve her meager belongings and the small amount of cash she had, and then vanish. The journey back through the estate was fraught with peril. She could hear the agitated voices of the German operatives, their commands sharp and angry, as they swept the grounds, searching for her. They were everywhere. She crept through the kitchen, where Ingrid and the other staff huddled together, their faces pale with fear, glancing at Lena with a mixture of terror and awe as she slipped past. Ingrid gave her a quick, knowing nod, a silent acknowledgement of the danger Lena had averted. Reaching the staff quarters, Lena moved with a practiced efficiency. She grabbed her worn backpack, pulled out the small stash of money she had saved, and retrieved her confiscated phone from the locker. It was dead. No matter. She didn't need it now. She needed to get out. She knew of a small, rarely used service gate at the far end of the estate, meant for groundskeepers bringing in supplies from a discreet back road. It was likely unmonitored, or at least less heavily guarded than the main entrances. It was her only hope. As she navigated the darkened grounds, keeping to the thickets and the cover of the ancient pines, she heard a siren wail in the distance, emergency services, perhaps, alerted by the Hells Angels, or by the commotion. It was a faint but welcome sound, a sign that the outside world was encroaching on Gruber's isolated fortress. Reaching the service gate, Lena found it unlocked, a minor oversight in the general chaos. She slipped through, closing it gently behind her. The cold night air hit her face, crisp and free. She was out. She was alive. She walked for hours along the deserted country roads, the distant lights of a small village her only guide. Her mind was a whirlwind of the night's events, the terror, the desperation, the profound relief. She had saved them. She, a simple cleaner, had thwarted a meticulously planned ambush. She eventually reached the village, a cluster of quaint Austrian chalets nestled in the valley. She found a small, unassuming inn, paid for a room with the last of her cash, and collapsed onto the bed, utterly exhausted. Sleep, however, would not come easily. The image of the operative's gun against her temple, the roar of the motorcycles, the gushing water, it was all seared into her memory. The next morning, news began to trickle in. The local papers, usually filled with mundane village gossip, carried cryptic headlines about unrest at the Gruber estate and the large motorcycle club turning away from a private meeting. There was no mention of an ambush, no specific details, but the undertone of something significant and dangerous having been averted was palpable. Herr Gruber, the reclusive owner, had issued a terse statement through his lawyers, blaming unforeseen technical difficulties for the disruption of his private gathering. The German operatives had vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving no trace. The police investigation was stonewalled by Gruber's powerful connections and the lack of any official complaint from the Hells Angels, who, true to their nature, preferred to handle their affairs outside the law. Lena knew the truth, though. She had seen it, lived it. She also knew that staying in Austria, or anywhere near the estate, was too dangerous. Gruber, a man of immense power and ruthless ambition, would not forget her. She was a loose end, a witness to his failed plot. She bought a train ticket, heading west, towards France, towards a new, anonymous life. She left behind the perpetual mist of the Austrian Alps, the echoing corridors of the fortress-like estate, and the terrifying memory of the ambush she had prevented. She was just Lena, a cleaner, but she carried with her the quiet knowledge of a life-saving act, a moment of courage in the face of overwhelming danger. She had heard the guard speaking German, she had understood the warning, and she had found a way to make sure the Hells Angels didn't enter the meeting. Her name would never be in the headlines, her heroic act would remain unsung, but for Lena, that was enough. She had chosen life, for herself, and for those she had never even met. And as the train carried her further away, into a future uncertain but free, she knew she had made the right choice.